Please welcome your host, Claire Beaumont.
Delighted to introduce my friend and colleague Sana, who Nithya, Richard and I have worked with very closely over a number of years. Sana is the founder of My Human Self, and that organisation specialises in designing and delivering leadership development, talent and organisational development solutions. The name My Human Self is quite deliberate. So Sana came up with that name because she says we're all humans before we are leaders or employees. And a really core part of the work that she does is keeping the human in the centre. Sana's got a broad and wide experience base. Her first leadership was in global consulting in London. About 16 years ago. And since then, she's worked in management consulting, banking and insurance, and supported clients across a variety of industries. And one of the things I love about Sana is that she's got quite diverse and interesting tastes. So when she's not working, she's ballroom dancing, she's enjoying jazz, and she's out walking. So she says all of those things keep her very centered and grounded. So Sana, I'm super looking forward to this discussion. It's a really interesting topic. I'm going to hand over to you and let's get going.
Yeah, amazing. Claire, am I able to share my slides as we're waiting for that? Thank you for the intro so much. Just a quick second. Hopefully you should see my slides. Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you for the intro. So I'm Sana. I have met some of you. Lovely to see the familiar faces who are here, and really excited for this session. I wanted to start by being really honest with you guys. I'm actually not a big fan of the word human-centered. Now, I did come up with that. This is my title. But for me, it doesn't really fully capture what I will be talking today. I just couldn't come up with a more suitable word, if I'm honest. So, but I'm going to assume that the word resonated because you are here, or maybe it was something about the description of the event that resonated. But I thought I'd start by just opening it up first to hear from you. What does human-centered leadership mean to you? And I'm happy for you to put in the chat or come off mute. Whatever feels more comfortable.
Well, so for me, Sana, it's humans being at the centre of everything.
Yeah, amazing. Any other thoughts? Anybody brave enough to come off mute?
So I think for me, the human-centered is, I think, recognizing that both us as well as people we might lead are humans, and humans have their, their idiosyncrasies, their differences, all that sort of stuff, including ourselves. I think it's just about being a bit realistic, that not everything is a process, a policy, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Simon. Naomi, leadership for the modern age. Can you tell me a little bit more? I'm going to put you on the spot. Hopefully you're all happy to come off mute.
I guess it's the shift that we need to be thinking about in leading and leadership, and that this time require this, post-COVID AI transforming the world of work is the modern age, and so having humans at the centre of that, given them this sort of massive kind of shift. It's a massive kind of shift that's happening in work and about to happen in work. It's like a necessary. It's just what we need now.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And Richard, leading with the heart. What does that look like to you?
Thanks, Sana. I was going to put leading with the head and the heart. It's connection between the two, and that the human-centeredness is about getting both together, the logic and the emotion, and being able to recognise, lead with empathy, and as we've been discussing, just the humans being central to I like what Naomi said about with all this disruption happening, where are humans going to sit in this? Well, they need to sit in the centre.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And Eloise, I love what you've written. We're people first and foremost, emotive and rational, and as such, work in progress. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more. And yes, Saskia, recognizing their team members are people whilst also workers. Yeah, absolutely, agree with all of that. I wanted to kick off this session by first exploring the context in which we're all operating today, leaders are operating today, because obviously context matters, and we're always sort of talking about the complexity of the world. So I looked into what are some of the biggest business challenges of 2025 and beyond. And I looked at Forbes, KPMG, AGS Financial Group, and our good friend ChatGPT. Good news is that they all agreed what the challenges are. So this is what came up. They all said AI, probably no surprises. Geopolitics and the geopolitical environment, digital workforce, talent shortages and retention, climate change, always in top 5, cyber risk, cost of living, technological disruption, regulatory changes, very much in top 5 always also, economy, and change fatigue. I'm going to just call it fatigue. I think people are just really tired. There's probably no surprises here to anybody. If anybody in this audience was in last month's session that we ran, Richard Kelly ran a session around strategic leadership in the face of complexity. He asked the audience then a question: what are the major trends impacting our world at present? And I've done a bit of a summary for you. And if you look at this, obviously you can see, you know, a lot of similarities. You've got AI, technology, climate change, global disruption, the talent piece. Got generational expectations. That's not in the usual sort of top 10, but that's absolutely something that companies are dealing with at the moment. And my favorite here, genuine leadership. But when I look at these, you know, to me, it feels like everyone's facing the same challenges, feeling the pressure of the same things, and operating in a similar context. But I started looking into research around what do CEOs and senior executives identify as their biggest challenges? And when I looked at that, something quite different came up. McKinsey did a study, this is from last year. They studied over 500 CEOs, and they found that 60% of the challenges that were raised by these CEOs were actually not business issues, but human-centric questions. Human-centric questions around how to operate with their teams, with their families, with the boards, with themselves. These CEOs are what McKinsey calls inside-out leaders. And what characterizes these leaders is that they have the confidence to make bold choices. They stand up for what they believe is right. And they demonstrate humility, vulnerability, selflessness, resilience. There's another study by a company called Egon Zehnder. They are a management consulting leadership advisory firm. They actually did 2 studies back in 2021 and 2024. And they had a near unanimous agreement among 1,000 leaders that as a CEO, I need the capacity.
I'll come with you.
Sorry, I think we've got.
I'll come with you. Just bear with me a sec. I'm just going through these.
Okay, there we go. Thank you for muting. They had as a near unanimous agreement that as a CEO, I need the capacity to transform myself as well as my organization. 80% in 2024 felt a need to embark on what they call a dual journey of personal and organizational transformation. And for me, one of the most interesting pieces of information from this data is that this number was 26% in 2021. So in 3 years, it's gone up to 80%. And the priority areas that they identified to be able to master all the complexity that they're dealing with was a culture of curiosity and open-mindedness, authentically relating to others, honing ability to listen, and investing in transforming themselves. And I've just taken sort of key pieces to highlight from this. What the study also found was that the most successful CEOs today are those who have mastered the capacity to be self-aware, adaptive, and relational. And I wanted to show you a quote before I open it for your thoughts. This is from a company called Mobius Executive Leadership. Some of their senior experts include Amy Edmondson, for example. Some people might recognize the name. They said that in leading from the inside out, executives turn meaningful attention to self-exploration and self-development. This enables them to understand their own emotions and habits, explore their core beliefs and values, and cultivate greater stillness. Leaders with a strong inner core are far better placed to guide an organization through the vast complexity and adaptive demands of the moment. So I'm going to stop there to see if there are any thoughts, any comments. Claire, I can see that you've put in the chat that something is surprising.
Oh, I think it's nicely surprising that the CEOs are saying that they're focused on these things. But what I'm curious about, Sana, that second study that you just cited there, did they give any reasons for why the focus has shifted so dramatically over that 3-year period?
I had a look at it a little while ago, so I can't actually recall, or whether it was just a survey and they didn't actually dig into the results. To be honest, I can't remember. It was a little while ago that I read it.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly talking to executives, right, there's a greater willingness to share vulnerability. There's a greater willingness to lean into kind of the more personal side of leadership, would be my experience. I'm super curious if other people have that same experience.
Yeah, Claire, I'd like to add something in there, because I think what may be happening is with this, the greater acceleration of complexity that leaders have to deal with, and realizing that just fronting up the way they used to front up and leading with knowledge and expertise just isn't cutting it, and that gradual awareness and awakening that they need to transform themselves internally to be able to deal with the external transformation. So I see, like you've suggested in a positive way, that's great to see that leaders are now understanding that they've got to transform from the inside out. So
it's hope. For me, it gives hope. I'm like, yes, that's amazing. You know, yeah.
Saskia. Sorry, Saskia.
Yeah, it's Saskia. You've said vulnerability is starting to be seen as a strength, not a weakness, at least in some pockets. Yeah, absolutely. Anything you wanted to add to that?
I think it as it becomes more of a, like, you're brave for showing it instead of you're weak and you shouldn't be showing it. But I do wonder, at least in my experience, I'm obviously in the people world and surrounded by people who know these things. So I think it's happening in some areas quicker than others who might not be across this stuff quite as much. But hopefully that mindset shift is slowly creeping across all areas. At least I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Naomi.
Oh, lucky me. I think actually Nithya had her hand up first, so I'm happy to go
sorry,
after
yes,
her. No, that's
oh.
okay. I feel like I want to just pay it forward to Nithya first.
That's all
Sorry.
good. Thanks, Naomi. I was just going to add, Sana, I wanted to add 2 more words. There's a self-exploration, self-development, just that need for heightened self-awareness of, how I respond or how I choose to respond in a situation, and self-regulation, because authenticity is one part of this, but being authentic and sort of responding in the interests of others is a leadership responsibility. So I can be true to myself, but, does that really serve the interests of others? I think that takes the next shift of that self-regulation piece as well. So yeah, loving this stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to go deeper into that in just a moment. So yeah, thanks for saying that. Naomi, let me come to you now.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I'm just reflecting on, kind of, we all know this, right? So sort of, it's kind of not that surprising. It's awesome to see the data that CEOs are also starting to kind of realize that. And I think we all must have our own sort of sources of data that prove that this is in fact at the center of effective leadership, and that effective leadership also allows you to achieve those that sort of longer term impact in your organization, organizational performance, business performance, not the short term kind of use of power or other ways of driving performance, but actually longer term transformational change. So, you know, there's lots of different ways that we can look at this. That show us different sort of evidence of and the kinds of leaders that looks like, and the sorts of capabilities or capacities that leaders are needing to demonstrate. We know it's true. We know it's true.
Yeah, I'm going to literally, that is going to be my next section. So I'm going to talk you through some of that. Amazing. Thank you. Georgina.
Hey, thank you. I was just thinking, in Asia Pacific, I look after a lot of different managers. We have a lot of different leaders across all different markets. And when we're talking to leaders in our Australia business, and I'm going to be really honest, they're a bit more on board with this, and we're having a bit more conversations. And in some cases, when I'm having conversations with my Chinese colleagues or my colleagues in Japan, I'm having different levels of conversations to this point, and they seem to be on a slightly different journey. I was wondering, just from a point of the statistics that you shared, is that across Asia Pacific, across cultures? And what have you seen in your experience in handling that different journey across different markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the studies are global studies, so definitely that's across the board. I'm about to talk about effective leadership and the research around it. Let me show you some stats. When we come to that, I'm going to address, because the question comes up all the time, does great leadership look the same across different cultures and different parts of the world? So remind me if I forget when I come to the stats.
Okay, awesome.
Pop up and say, Sana, you were going to talk something about that. Perfect. Yeah, amazing. Okay, so with that, let me move on to what the research tells us. So those were obviously, they had interviewed CEOs and asked them, what do you think great looks like? But when we start looking at sort of deeper research, 30, 40 years of research around effective leadership, what does that actually look like? I think very often when we think about leadership development and how to develop the sort of right things in our leaders to help them manage the complexity and deal with the current business challenges and lead the teams, what we focus really heavily on, or sometimes what we focus only on, is capability development. So obviously these look different in different companies, but for leaders, there's always something about strategic thinking and influencing and managing change and managing stakeholders, all those things. What the research actually tells us is that all these things are absolutely necessary, but they are not adequate on their own. So just giving leaders more capability, more skills, more sort of knowledge, technical skills, doesn't actually equal more effective leaders. What the researchers found that what actually determines how effective a leader is how well they understand and manage themselves. Now, researchers in this space call this the inner game. An inner game is essentially your depth, your level of self-awareness. It's understanding the deep-rooted beliefs that we all have that drive our behavior. It's knowing our values and living and behaving according to those. Emotional intelligence, probably no surprise. It's all the systems that we have to make decisions, make meaning, that have obviously evolved throughout our lifetime, and all the mental models that we have to make sense of reality. How evolved this inner game is actually what determines how effective a leader is. And I think what's really interesting is the research found that in order for these capabilities to evolve, our inner game needs to evolve at the same pace. And that isn't happening at the moment. I'm about to show you why. But very interestingly, when the inner game piece evolves, automatically our capability evolves as well. And I want you to put this at the back of your mind. This will hopefully make more sense in just a couple of slides time when I get to that. But if you think back to the CEO research and the pieces around 80% of CEOs identifying the need to transform themselves, you talked about exploring core beliefs and values and self-awareness and the way you relate to others and listening, so emotional intelligence. So what they're actually referring to is their inner game and inner game development. So if inner game development is the key to effective leadership, how do we develop and evolve our inner game? in order to understand that, I'm going to get a little bit theoretical, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But in order for us to understand this a little bit more, we need to understand something called the theory of adult development. Are people familiar with, have you heard of the theory of adult development? Couple of nods. So I need to scroll to see everybody. Yeah, a couple of people maybe have, maybe some people haven't. I'm going to show you a model by Professor Robert Keegan. He is a Harvard psychologist, leading researcher in this space. Not the only one, but I really like Keegan. Keegan identified 5 stages of development, and he found that our inner game evolves as we progress through these stages of development. And progressing isn't about learning new things. It's about transforming how we understand ourselves and the world around us. I'm going to quickly talk you through the model because it starts making a little bit more sense as we get into it. The first stage is children, which I won't go into because I think we all kind of know children develop and hit certain milestones, and we understand and appreciate that. But then when we come to adults, the second stage is called the imperial mind. And at this stage, I guess we're really very defined by sort of personal needs, personal agendas, relationships to serve our personal needs and agendas. And at this stage, this is kind of where adolescents are. Now, research is finding that about 6% of adults are at this stage still. Now, I'm not going to name any names. I'm sure we can all think of some people who are definitely at this stage. Then comes stage 3, which is called the socialized mind. And when we are at this stage, we are very much sort of needing external validation, and our thoughts and our beliefs and our values are very much based on what other people think and believe and value, whether that's our families or friends or colleagues or society at large or our cultures. There's a really heavy focus on kind of meeting other people's expectations, hierarchies, and so forth. For me, the really interesting stat here is that about 60 to 80% of adults are here. And when you look at the research around leaders, it's sort of pointing closer to the 80%. So about 4 out of 5 leaders are at this stage of development. The fourth is called the self-authoring mind. And when we are at this stage, we start becoming sort of more independent from the standards and expectations of our environment, of our colleagues, our families. We start taking more sort of radical responsibility for ourselves, for our emotions, for our behaviors, for our beliefs. We start challenging our identities and some of the things that we believe, which then dictate how we behave. Research is pointing to about 15 to 35% of adults being here. And when it comes to leaders, closer to that 15%. I will mention the variation is also because most of us are kind of in between the stages, just depending on the context and the people we're dealing with. The final stage is called self-transforming mind. I won't go too much into it because we're less than 1% of adults are there. But we can obviously see that pretty much everybody is sort of at stage 3 or stage 4. Now, you might be wondering, what does this look like? What does this mean? What is the difference between a leader who is at stage 3 or a stage 4? And what does their inner game development look like? And what does their leadership look like? One of the best ways to understand the difference is through something called the reactive tendencies. Reactive tendencies are essentially fear-based beliefs that drive our behavior. And I will note that the beliefs are often unconscious. So they are not fears like fear of flying that we are very much aware of or can try and manage. Often we are totally unaware of these, and they're fears that have sort of formed throughout our lives through the events and people that we've experienced. And these fears manage our behavior at a very deep level. There are 3 reactive tendencies. Some models say 5, but really when you look at the 5, it kind of fits quite neatly into the 3. So I'm going to talk you through the 3. Now, we all have at least 1. Some people have 2, some people are 3. You're no better for worse having 1, 2, or 3. Even if you're at stage 4, stage 5 of your development, you still have a reactive tendency. And I'll talk you through what the difference between the stages is. But as I'm going to talk you through these, I'm going to encourage you to try and identify what your tendency or tendencies are, You don't need to share unless you wish to. I'm happy for you to put it in the chat if something really resonates. I'm going to give a definition. They don't all need to apply for that to be your tendency. If there's something, just one thing that kind of stings a little bit or feels a bit familiar, then that's likely going to be your tendency. So the first one is complying. And people with a complying tendency have a fear-based belief that they need to be liked, they need to be accepted, they need to belong, they need to meet the expectations of others, and they need to follow the rules. Otherwise, they are not good enough, they're not worthy, they are not safe. The second tendency is that I need to be right, I need to be a little bit better than everybody, I need to have maybe a bit of a protective layer, I need to be a bit distant, or I need to be self-sufficient. Otherwise, I'm not safe, I'm not worthy. And the third one is controlling. And the belief here is that I need to be in control of situations. I need to be the perfect, I need to be best, I need to be producing perfect work, I need to be winning. Otherwise, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe. The difference between somebody at stage 3 and somebody at stage 4 is that people at stage 4, they usually are aware of their tendency. They know why they have that tendency. They know what life events have sort of, brought that tendency to life for them. They know what triggers that tendency in the current day-to-day role and just everyday life. They usually know how to manage it. And some of the very great leaders, they actually know how to use this to their advantage. So all these tendencies have strengths associated with them as well. Otherwise, we would be getting rid of them. But they serve a purpose, but they also have liabilities associated with them. I'm going to stop for questions in just a moment, but I wanted to quickly have a look at these just in the light of that CEO research. So if you remember, what the CEOs talked about was, vulnerability, humility, making bold choices, standing up for what's right, curiosity, and so forth. So if we look at these tendencies, if you think about a strong desire or need to be liked, not to rock the boat, not to upset anybody, what this looks like in leaders and in their behaviors is, and these are just some examples, these are leaders who will avoid difficult conversations and who will usually shy away from giving challenging feedback. They usually submit to others' needs, in particular if they are people who are more senior than them. Because remember, at stage 3, everything is about meeting others' expectations and needing that validation. They frequently seek advice before making decisions, and they obviously struggle to address disagreements in a direct manner, so they can have a bit of a passive-aggressive style. So think about this in light of, for example, making bold choices or standing up for what's right. That's probably not happening if you are being led by this tendency. If we think about protecting, what this looks like in leaders is they can come across cold, uncaring. People with this tendency absolutely not demonstrating vulnerability. They will not be taking risks. And I guess, if you think about somebody who always needs to be a little bit better, a little bit superior, it's very hard to kind of, I guess, build a, deep connection, build that trust-based environment. So that can really distance people. So think about that in light of vulnerability or humility or curiosity or being relational. And then finally, we've got controlling. What this looks like in leaders is obviously often demanding flawless performance of themselves and of others, and unrealistic expectations. Usually people come second or third, fourth, feelings come very last. It's very often about sort of results, getting things done. The style can be a little bit aggressive, and often they're sort of discounting negative feedback as well. So again, think about that in light of being vulnerable, having humility, open-mindedness, ability to listen, being adaptive, being selfless. And in fact, if you think about these in light of innovating, managing change, or or strategic thinking. Let's talk about that. So in last session, Richard talked about, and Richard, I'm paraphrasing, hopefully I'm getting this right. You talked about how you can't solve complex problems from a place of hierarchy and how you need true collaboration to be able to do that. How does that happen with leaders who have a strong controlling or protecting tendency? It doesn't. And like the most common requests I get when I build development programs is always, our leaders are not giving feedback, they're not constructively challenging, so can you do some training on how to give feedback? I mean, sure, absolutely I can, but that's unlikely to fix the issue. So I'm going to try and bring you back to an earlier slide where I talked about the research, where it found that capability can't evolve unless our inner game evolves. And this is why. So when we talk about the critical need for human-centered leaders, it's not just because they need to be vulnerable and show humility and do all those sort of human qualities. It's actually because of the capability can't evolve either. They evolve together, which means if they are not moving up at the same time, it's stopping things like innovating, customer focus, strategic thinking, and all those good things. I'm going to stop for questions and comments in just a moment, and then I'm going to cover some practical suggestions, but I'll show you one quick piece of research before I move on to that and links to this. So when the research looked at leaders who operate from a higher stage of development, so who have an understanding of their reactive tendency and they're able to manage it, they also found that these leaders demonstrate certain capabilities which really support their effectiveness. And I've sort of bucketed them under leading self, leading others, leading the business, because I think that hopefully resonates for a lot of you. And there probably isn't that many surprising things. You know, again, you've got self-awareness, integrity, courageous authenticity, continuous sort of self-learning, and in leading others, mentoring, caring, developing, collaborating, and in leading business, all the usual sort of suspects: strategy, purpose, vision, results, decisions. But you also got things like sustainable productivity, which isn't really possible if you've got a lot of controlling tendency leaders, systems thinking, community concern. So when they looked at, they looked at leaders who are operating from this space, how do these correlate to perceived leadership effectiveness? So when you've got leaders who are at the highest stage of development, demonstrating these capabilities, managing their reactive tendencies, what is the perceived effectiveness of these leaders? How does it correlate? And they found a correlation of 0.76 to 0.91, which is extremely high when it comes to humans. And then they did another layer. They looked at all these leaders who score very high and are perceived to be highly affected. How does that actually translate to business performance? And business performance was looking at things like sales, market share, new products, and overall business performance. And they found a correlation of 0.5 to 0.6, which is also really high. Georgina, you asked the question, what does this look like? Is this, the same across different cultures? I actually don't have the stats in this slide, but they have done a study across the world because people ask the question, is there a difference between cultures? And they kind of presented, I guess, the findings and looked at leaders who demonstrate these qualities and capabilities. And the average correlation was between 0.87 to 0.91 across all the different continents. There was absolutely no difference. Don't shoot the messenger. Women did perform much better than men across all of them. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me. But across cultures, there isn't a difference. So people do perceive similar type of leaders to be effective. Women usually perform better across all of these capabilities. So I've spoken for a very long time. I'm going to stop for comments, questions. I'm going to have a look if there's. Claire, have we had any comments that in the chat that I need to explore?
I think we've covered them off so far.
Yeah.
Yep.
Naomi.
Hello again. Hi everyone. I was reminded this week that this research that actually these complying, protecting, controlling behaviours also can correlate to business performance, and that the difference is the short-term nature of the impact on business performance, rather than the, creating, the evolving to something quite new, quite different, the transformation of the organization.
Yeah.
Is the difference between those who embody the capabilities that are sitting underneath those, complying, protecting, controlling boxes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a good reminder for me, because I've definitely drunk the Kool-Aid on these things that you're talking about today, Sana.
Yeah.
And yet when you're sort of facing into leaders who are trying to make sense of this, and they go, yeah, but but actually I get really good results when I'm when I'm in these, even irrespective of whatever comes out for me in complying, protecting and controlling.
Yeah.
So it was it's just that nuance that I just needed to remind myself that actually, the correlation to leadership effectiveness isn't there, but the correlation to business performance is there, but on the short term, not on that longer term transformational, co-creative approach. So anyway, that's just my learning of the week, and just bringing that into this room.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, Naomi. I sort of said that earlier, I didn't go into it, but I sort of mentioned that all those reactive tendencies, they've got strengths associated with them, right? Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them. They serve a purpose, and that's why they are so hard to get rid of. So if you think about somebody with a compliant tendency, they're usually loved. People love them. What a great leader. Never says a bad word. Is so supportive. Then spends so much time developing me. Yeah, I mean, they're not having those hard conversations. So I'm sure they are building a lovely culture around them. But is it the most, resulting to, getting the results, right? Is it the transformational leadership? Probably not. People we're protecting, they're usually very logical, able to kind of, step back and think about a situation and, take a sort of measured approach. And controlling, I mean, they get things done. They get the results for sure, but at what cost? Yeah. It's the short term, right? And that's, it's sustainable productivity is kind of alluding to the fact that that doesn't work in the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, Claire.
I'm with you.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation and an observation, a deep sigh there, Naomi. You're thinking hard as you are articulating your question. But the thing that's on my mind about this, there's a lot in the press, in the media, about narcissistic leaders, and we can all identify maybe some on the political stage.
Yeah, same at the stage 2. I'm like, we definitely know some people at stage 2 development.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And one of the things that kind of is on my mind about it, if there are some good aspects of a controlling leader, is that why we see so many narcissists in leadership positions? Because they're, certainly, and I wouldn't profess to knowing a lot about narcissism, but certainly what limited stuff I know about narcissism would say that, they're not at all complying, they're not very protecting, but they're very, very controlling. And we seem to have a lot of narcissistic leaders in some fairly senior positions. It's a curious question. I don't have the answer.
I would probably say protecting is a feature. I'm not an expert either, but I think like the superiority, I mean, obviously it comes from like a deep-rooted insecurity. It's not like a true superiority in the sense that that's what they are, but I think that's kind of how it shows up. But yes, completely agree with you. Yeah.
And Nithya, you've just put a comment in there about toxic leadership.
Yeah, I was just thinking, reflecting on your comment, Claire, around narcissistic leadership, and that's sort of termed as being toxic. When I suppose you show probably very extreme tendencies in the reactive zone here. I think that that sort of then shows up as that piece around what's the impact to your team and the overall system. it's in the negative as what Sana showed here in terms of the correlation.
Yeah, definitely. Georgina.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is so interesting. And I mean, just this page really sums up all the things that we've been trying to help our leaders with and work through. I was just interested to hear what have been some of your effective ways of getting leaders who are somewhat interested and engaged in the conversation? So we're not looking at people that are against this, they're on board and they see the results. What are some things that you've been able to do to actually help them take these steps forward? Has it been to identify the complying, protecting, controlling elements, the tendencies? Has it been about identifying where they're at in the adult development? What advice do you have for us?
Yeah, I'm going to
actually getting it going.
Yeah, my final section is around some
Oh,
practical
sorry, I'm
tips and
always asking
suggestions.
a question about the next thing.
You should have been co-hosting. You're like, Sana, I've got a question for you, and I'm like, well, I'm literally about to serve it, so here it comes. No, but yeah, so I'm going to just talk to that in just a moment.
Okay.
But I would say yes. For me, like a lot of people don't know this stuff. They don't know about adult development. They don't know the reactive tendency. So like I've got clients where we do some deep assessments and we have conversations. That usually is the starter, right? Building the awareness of this piece. Sometimes I just cover this slide and I'm like, what do you think you are, right? Like, let's start with that. And then it's just sort of like starting to unpack it a little bit. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Eloise, I'll come to you before I move on to the last piece.
Yeah, I was going to take the conversation back to the commentary around narcissistic leaders. In my experience with narcissistic leaders, they're incredible at managing up.
Yes.
And woeful at burning people out downwards. And that is probably why there's so many of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because senior people don't see or maybe not listen.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just I think, Claire, you made the point.
Yeah, interesting reflection. I think you're probably right.
Yeah, and usually very charismatic as well. So
I think there's, and then also the data points they look at.
Yeah.
So they're not always looking at the data points that we might be looking at in terms of attrition and the reasons why people are leaving. It's always can be attained to something else. And if the results are there, it's it's an interesting perspective.
And they're really, really good at spinning it around, so their problems are actually somebody else's.
Yes. Yeah. Never their fault. Never their fault. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Before I move on to practical, I wanted to show you just a quick quote from Keegan and Lisa Leahy. They said, when we experience the world as too complex, we are not just experiencing the complexity of the world. We are experiencing a mismatch between the world's complexity and our own at this moment. There are only two logical ways to mend this mismatch: reduce the world's complexity or increase our own. So the big question is, what do we do with all this information? So I wanted to, before I jump into the practical tips, I'll just give you a couple of considerations. Firstly, you all probably know this. Adults learn and develop only if they want to. So we need to appreciate that this journey is not for everybody. So if you are working in an environment where you are mandating like development programs across cohorts, this is not going to land for everybody. Not everybody wants to do the work. Progressing through the stages is really hard and it doesn't happen fast. And there is also research shows a link to age. So the older you are doesn't equal the higher stage you're at. If you want to progress, you actually need to put in some conscious effort. But if you've got a cohort of leaders, of really young leaders in their 20s, their 30s, they are just not going to be at a higher stage of development. And in my opinion, a lot of this stuff just comes with life experience. I'm sure that's why there's the age link. So unfortunately, we can't fast forward that life experience for people. So then you need to understand, if you've got a really young cohort of leaders, that, appreciate where they're at and how you can start building that awareness. This might seem like a massive task and people are like, how much do I have to do and help people? I think the important thing is setting the foundations. starting to talk about some of these concepts and opening the awareness and supporting that deep transformation work and thinking about where do I offer that support. But we can't really handhold, and we don't need to handhold throughout all of it. Probably the worst news of all, if you want sustainable long-term results, you need to change the collective. Changing one person is not going to shift the dial. So my tips for putting this into action, this is not a comprehensive list, but just something for you to start with. So firstly, when you're thinking about any development initiatives, be really clear on your why, your what, and the who. So what's the purpose of your development? Why are you doing this? What are you trying to develop? What's the reason behind it? Who are you developing? Do these people want to develop? Do they want to put the work in? And then you want to consider the metrics and measuring your ROI. Because as I said, this isn't quick stuff. The shift doesn't happen quickly, but you want to start thinking about how do we see when there is a change? How do we measure that? Again, think about the collective versus the individual. So obviously any inner game development needs to start with the individual, but if you want to have an impact, you need the collective. You want to also consider your broader organizational culture. So think about the culture of feedback, not just top down, but bottom up. Are there opportunities for people to reflect and correct their behavior? Can people be vulnerable? Can they take risks? Can they challenge, in particular, more senior people? And you might say that they can, but is that the perception that people also have? What are the consequences when they do that? When it comes to increasing self-awareness, there's obviously so many ways of doing that. As I mentioned earlier, I usually try and sort of talk about this piece and start raising the awareness. Sometimes with more sort of junior cohorts, I just talk about the reactive tendencies. I don't go into the theories, but just kind of getting people to think about it and start challenging, or just thinking about like, what are my beliefs? Why am I thinking this way and how am I behaving? But obviously there are plenty of different assessments that you can utilize to try and increase self-awareness. Coaching is incredible together with assessment if there is an opportunity for that. Obviously thinking about how do people get ongoing feedback on their behavior? How can you build a space for people to reflect and give them the practice and the tools? Maybe you need to teach people. Maybe you need to give them some questions to reflect on. How can people think about how people can test and practice new behaviors? And obviously ongoing learning, people learn in different ways. So you can think about sort of, giving people readings around this topic or podcasts or other learning opportunities. I think curiosity is kind of underpinning all of this. We can only, we have to be curious about the world in order for us to be curious about ourselves and vice versa. So think about how you can just cultivate organizational curiosity. Can you expose people to external views, external ways of operating, keynote speakers, whatever that might be? Think about having a culture of continuous learning and encouraging that. Often I see a lot of business processes and practices that stop curiosity. So think about where do we need to review that and how can we better, more effectively share ideas and innovate. And then finally, continue building that capability. So obviously, as I said, they are linked. Capability development shouldn't be done just on its own, but you do need to still focus on that as well. So think about, do we focus on the capabilities that are linked to effectiveness? And how do we constantly keep uplifting the complexity when we do capability development? And with that, before we kind of close the session, go into next steps, I'm going to just come to you for any final comments, questions. Naomi, you've written a comment, age is the key factor of adult development. It's also possible that a young person can have deep self-growth. Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, definitely. I think I would say that, like somebody in their 20s, you probably still wouldn't see them at like a higher stage of development, no matter how self-aware they were. But I think they are definitely at a better starting point. And this is just me talking to what the research is telling us. There might be obviously individual cases, but absolutely, just because somebody's 60 doesn't mean that they are at stage 4 or 5. Yeah, definitely. Any other comments? questions, thoughts? Has this resonated?
For sure resonated with me when I think about those reactive tendencies. I recognise a few of those, Anna.
Same. Tick, tick, you know.
Yes, and if I just jump in there for a moment, I think to me the connection between when we think about transformation in complex environments, you've really nailed the kind of we know we have to raise the bar on our ability to have adaptive capacity, but I think you framed up really well why that is the imperative when you say the critical need for human-centered leadership, because you're not going to make the transition. I think you make the case very well that it's got to start back. If we want to be over here, it's got to start back here, and it's got to start with, as you've been talking about, your own self-awareness. And that has to be done en masse in large organisations, and I don't think we're approaching it. And your point about not everyone's ready for the journey. So how do you identify quickly who's ready for the journey and work out those who, whether they're ready, will never be able to make the journey?
Yeah, definitely. Nithya.
Yeah, Senna, I was just thinking about Georgina's question about the cultural considerations, and the fact that all of this is good from a personal standpoint, but then the context is so key, right? I mean, even locally, if you're in an organization that's pretty stifling and bureaucratic and you are fully self-aware and, law and protective, compliant and so on, there's still going to be that clash with the system. So I think being able to look at oneself in that context is what's really resonating for me.
Yeah, amazing. Okay.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about is this kind of the concept of being pausing and being intentional in your leadership, and to foster self-insight, to foster self-awareness, which kind of is the crux of what you've been talking about, Sana. We need to let our leaders slow down. We need to give them the space to pause, and it's really, really difficult for organisations to do that, but it's such a critical thing to do. So, that pause principle, Kevin Cashman, he had it right, didn't he?
Absolutely. To go slow, to go fast. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, I'll just quickly run through a couple of next steps before we wrap up this session. So our next session is going to be for the leadership experiment in a month's time. Nithya will be running a session around cultivating authentic leadership. I've just popped the link in the chat. If you want to register for that session, we would obviously love to see you there if that topic is of interest to you. We also have a podcast. We produce a sort of short podcast off the back of all of our sessions. So you can find them on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube just by searching for the Leadership Experiment. If you are interested in becoming part of our community, we won't spam you. We will just invite you to all the great events and give you some, pieces of information that we share. You can join the community through our website. We also have a LinkedIn page, so do come and follow us. And if there's anybody who you think would enjoy being part of this community, we obviously welcome everybody to join us. I think we've got 187 members at the moment, so we're really delighted with that. But with that, Claire, I'll hand over to you just to close it, but just wanted to say thank you so much for being here on a Friday, listening, participating. I really appreciate you. If you've got any questions, if you need support, you want to share any thoughts, you can reach me by my email or find me on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with everybody. Claire, I'll hand over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sana. What an interesting conversation, and thank you everyone for participating in it. Just a quick call out, Ian Middleton's already registered for the next session, so hot off the mark there. We look forward to welcoming everyone back into the conversation. Certainly, every time I come away from one of these conversations, I feel a little bit more inspired, a little bit more informed, and a little bit more curious about leadership. So I hope that that's everyone else's reactions as well. Enjoy the weekend. Let's hope that the rain stays away, and we'll see you next time round for another really interesting discussion. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
The article, we'll be writing it on the back of this leadership dialogue. Article will be out this afternoon.
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard.
Richard. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
For more information on the Leadership Experiment and to join our community, please go to www.theleadershipexperiment.com. Thank you for listening.